The moment I walked into that conference room, my son-in-law's face did something I hadn't seen in 31 years on the bench. It crumpled. Not all at once. It started at the eyes. That flicker of recognition, then spread downward like a crack running through old plaster. He grabbed the edge of the table. My daughter didn't notice. She was still smiling at her attorney, that practiced, patient smile she'd been wearing for the past 4 months. The one that said, "This is all very unfortunate, but what can you do?" She noticed when the attorney stopped talking. I set my briefcase on the table and took the seat across from them. "Mom," my daughter said, "what are you doing here?" I said, "Sitting down, sweetheart." Let me back up. My name is Harriet Lawson. I am 68 years old, and for 31 years, I served as a family court judge in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. I presided over more guardianship cases than I can count. Cases exactly like the one my own family had filed against me. I'd seen every version of it. Adult children who genuinely loved their parents and were making heartbreaking decisions. Adult children who were greedy and impatient and dressed it up in the language of concern. I knew the paperwork. I knew the language. I knew the exact moment in a proceeding when the person being petitioned against finally understood what was happening to them. I understood the moment my daughter called to tell me about the little family meeting she'd organized. The way she said it, breezy, offhand, as if it were a barbecue, told me everything. It had started 8 months earlier, the way these things always start. Gradually, then, all at once. My husband passed 4 years ago. 38 years with that man, and losing him was like losing a hand. You keep reaching for things and finding only air. I grieved hard for about a year, and then I did what I always do. I got back to work. I had my routine. Tuesday mornings I played bridge at the rec center on Forbes Avenue. Wednesday afternoons, I volunteered at the literacy program at the Carnegie Library, helping adults learn to read. I kept my own books, managed my own investments, drove my own hisbestments, drove my own car to my own appointments. I had a financial advisor I'd trusted for 20 years named Philip, and between my judicial pension, my late husband's life insurance, and the investments we'd built together, I was comfortable. More than comfortable. My son-in-law's name is Derek. He's 42 and he sells commercial real estate, or he tries to. He'd had a bad few years. A deal that collapsed in 2022. Another one that never closed in 2023. A business partner who apparently helped himself to a significant portion of a shared account. I knew all of this because my daughter told me, and I listened the way mothers listen. With my whole chest. I felt for him. I really did. What I didn't know until later was that while I was feeling for him, he was looking at my house. I live in the same house my husband and I bought in 1991. It's a 4-bedroom colonial in Mount Lebanon, well-maintained, paid off, and in a neighborhood where the median home value has quietly climbed to something that would astonish my younger self. It is, by any reasonable accounting, the most valuable thing I own. Derek knew the exact number. He was, after all, in real estate. The phone calls started in February. My daughter, her name is Sherry, she's 44, and I love her with an intensity that has never once wavered even through all of this, began calling more frequently, which I appreciated at first. We'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm of once a week, Sunday evenings, and suddenly she was calling 3 times a week, sometimes 4. How are you sleeping? Are you eating? Have you talked to Dr. Okafor lately? Have you had your eyes checked? She mentioned twice that a friend of hers had a mother who'd had a minor stroke, and nobody noticed because they all just assumed she was being forgetful. I am not a forgetful person. I ran a courtroom for 3 decades. I remember case numbers, precedents, the names of every attorney who appeared before me regularly, the particular tendencies of the social workers assigned to my docket. My memory is, if anything, sharper than it needs to be for ordinary life. But I listened to my daughter's concern and I told her I was fine, and I believe she believed me, and I thought nothing more of it. In March, she asked if I'd thought about simplifying, maybe selling the house. It was a lot to maintain. A woman living alone in a 4-bedroom house? Didn't I feel rattling around in it sometimes? She and Derek had looked at a few very lovely senior living communities, just out of curiosity, just to have options on the table. There was one in Peters Township that had a pool and a beautiful dining room. She'd heard wonderful things. I told her I had no interest in moving. I'd raised her in this house. Her father had died in the bedroom upstairs, holding my hand, looking out the window at the maple tree he'd planted the year she was born. I was not moving to Peters Township. She let it go, or seemed to. In April, she asked me to add Derek to my checking account. Just so someone could help with bills, she said, in case anything ever happened. I told her my attorney already had power of attorney for financial matters in case of incapacity. The same attorney I'd used for 20 years. A woman named Frances Albright who had an office on Cochrane Road and whom I trusted completely. Sherry said that was fine, but it would be so much more convenient if it were family. I said I understood, but I was happy with the arrangement I had. I noticed the silence on the phone after I said that. It lasted only a second, but I am a person who has spent 31 years reading silences. I called Frances the next morning. I didn't tell her everything because I didn't have everything yet. I just told her to make sure our documents were in order and current. She said they were. I told her that if anyone contacted her claiming to represent my family's interests in relation to my estate or my capacity, she should notify me immediately before taking any action. She said she understood and would. Then I waited. In May, Sherry came to visit for a weekend, which was lovely. We went to the Phipps Conservatory, which has been one of my favorite places since I was a girl, and we had dinner at a restaurant on the south side, and split a bottle of Riesling, and talked about her kids. I have 2 grandchildren, a boy of 15 named Owen from Derek's previous marriage, and a girl of 12 named Bree who is mine in every way that matters, and it felt, almost, like nothing was wrong. Almost. Because twice that weekend, Sherry made small comments. Once about how the gutters on the east side of the house looked clogged. Once about how it must be hard to keep up with the yard on my own. Small things, maintenance things, the kind of things a person notices when they are building a case. I said I had a service that handled both and gave her the name and phone number in case she ever needed a reference. She smiled and said that was great. In June, Derek called me himself. This was unusual. Derek and I were cordial but not close. We didn't call each other. He said he'd been thinking about me and wanted to talk about something he'd noticed. He'd been reviewing some real estate values in my area, he said, and he thought now might actually be a very good time to consider selling, purely from a market standpoint. He could put me in touch with a colleague. No pressure. Just a conversation. And separately, and he was sorry to bring this up, but he cared about me and felt someone should say it. He noticed at Easter that I'd repeated myself a couple of times during dinner. He wasn't trying to alarm me. He just thought maybe a conversation with my doctor might be worth having. I thanked him for his concern. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I did not repeat myself at Easter. I have a very clear memory of every conversation I had at Easter because I have a very clear memory generally, and because I have kept a journal every single day since 1987, and I had written down the dinner conversation in some detail that same evening, the way I always do. I went and got that journal and I read the Easter entry and I was not confused and I did not repeat myself. I also did not call my doctor. I called my grandson, Owen. This requires explanation. Owen is Derek's son from his first marriage, and he has lived with Derek and Sherry since he was 8 years old, and he and I have developed a friendship over those years that is genuine and separate from the family politics. He is a serious kid, a reader, careful with his words. He reminds me a little of myself at that age. We had a standing arrangement where he came to my house for lunch every other Saturday, and I helped him with his AP history reading, and he fixed things on my computer that I pretended not to understand more than I actually didn't. I asked him, carefully, whether he'd heard anything at home about plans relating to me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Grandma Harriet, I think you should probably talk to a lawyer." I said I was a lawyer? He almost smiled. I could hear it. "A different one," he said. "I think they've already talked to someone." That night, I made a list. I'd spent 31 years making lists of what I knew, what I suspected, and what I needed to prove. I still thought in that structure. What I knew: my son-in-law wanted my house. My daughter, whether out of genuine concern or marital loyalty or some combination, was helping him build a case that I was declining. They had, according to Owen, already consulted an attorney. What I suspected: they were going to file for guardianship. An appointed guardian has control over housing, finances, medical decisions. If they were named my guardians, they could sell my house and manage the proceeds. In Pennsylvania, the process requires medical evidence of incapacity, a petition to the court, a hearing. I knew exactly how it worked because I had run those hearings. What I needed to prove: I was not incapacitated. And I needed to be prepared for a hearing before they filed, not after. I called Frances Albright the next morning and told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Harriet, they filed a petition last Thursday." There it was. I asked her to send me the filing. The petition alleged cognitive decline. It cited, among other things, 2 incidents of observed confusion, one at Easter, one at a family dinner in March, and included a letter from a physician I had never heard of, a Dr. Doan Pelham, who practiced in Cranberry Township, which is 30 minutes from my house and where I have never sought medical care in my life. The letter stated that based on an evaluation conducted in April, Dr. Pelham had concerns about my executive function and recommended further assessment. I had not seen Dr. Pelham in April. I had not seen Dr. Pelham ever. I sat with that for about 30 seconds. Then I got to work. I had kept records for 31 years because I believed in records the way some people believe in prayer. My journals documented my daily activities, my decision-making, my finances, my conversations, going back decades. I had every tax return since 1981. I had every medical record since my husband and I joined our current practice in 1994, and Dr. Okafor had been my physician for 15 years and knew my cognition as well as any person alive. I had correspondence, receipts, statements. I also had, because I am a former family court judge with 31 years of professional relationships, a substantial personal knowledge of who was good at what in the legal community of Western Pennsylvania. I called a colleague, a woman who'd practiced elder law for 22 years, before becoming one of the most effective guardianship defense attorneys in the state. Her name is Maureen Gable, and she owed me nothing, and I asked for her help anyway, and she gave it. I also called Dr. Okafor and scheduled a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. He performed it himself over 2 appointments and documented the results in detail. No evidence of decline, memory, and executive function, well within normal range for my age. No clinical basis for concern. Then I called the medical licensing board about Dr. Pelham. That, it turned out, was where things got interesting. Dr. Pelham had a license in Pennsylvania, but his specialty was not geriatric medicine or neurology or any field with relevance to cognitive assessment. He was a general practitioner who had opened his practice 8 months earlier. His largest referral source, according to what Maureen was able to obtain through discovery, was Derek's business partner. The same business partner who had allegedly helped himself to a shared account. I want to be honest about what I felt when I understood the full shape of it. There is a version of this story where I say I felt nothing, where I was simply a former judge analyzing evidence, clinical and detached. That would be a lie. What I felt was grief. The specific grief of a parent who has raised a child and loved that child, and now must look at what that child has allowed herself to become. I sat in my kitchen and I looked at the maple tree in the backyard. The one my husband planted, and I cried for about 20 minutes. Then I dried my face and went back to my notes. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in October. My daughter and Derek arrived with their attorney, a young man named Forsyth who had a good suit and an air of confidence that I recognized as the particular confidence of someone who has never lost a case he understood. He did not yet understand this one. I came in after them. I had dressed carefully. Not to perform frailty, not to perform authority, just to look like myself. Dark slacks, a cream blouse, my good wool blazer. The small pearl earrings my husband gave me for our 25th anniversary. Maureen was beside me. My daughter saw me and her expression did something complicated. Something that was not quite surprise and not quite guilt, but something in between. Derek saw me and went pale. He knew my name. Not from the family, from the profession. Harriet Lawson. He knew, suddenly, that he had filed a fraudulent medical letter against a sitting retired family court judge who had spent 3 decades in this exact system, and that she had known about it for 4 months, and that she had spent those 4 months preparing. Forsyth recovered faster than Derek. He leaned over and they whispered, and I watched Forsyth's confidence recalibrate in real time. I had seen it before. Attorneys do it. They feel the floor shift and they adjust their weight. Maureen was very good. She presented Dr. Okafor's evaluation. She presented my journals, 37 years of daily entries in my own handwriting, articulate and detailed and dated. She presented my financial records. She presented the licensing board's inquiry into Dr. Pelham, which was ongoing. She presented the connection between Dr. Pelham and Derek's business associate. She presented an affidavit from Francis Albright documenting every interaction related to my estate going back 14 months. She also presented at the end something I had prepared myself, a simple summary of my professional background. 31 years on the family court bench, hundreds of guardianship cases presided over, an intimate knowledge of every procedural requirement, every evidentiary standard, every ethical obligation of the court. The hearing officer, a woman about Forsyth's age who had the careful stillness of someone taking everything in, looked at the summary for a long moment. Then she looked at Derek. Then she looked at my daughter. Sherry was crying. She'd been crying since Maureen started talking. I don't know exactly when she understood how far this had gone, whether it was the fake doctor or the business connection, or simply seeing her mother across a table presenting 31 years of evidence of a functioning, capable life. I don't know what Derek had told her and what he hadn't. The petition was dismissed. There was more after that. There always is. The medical licensing board opened a formal investigation into Dr. Pelham. Maureen filed a complaint with the state bar relating to the petition's evidentiary basis. Derek retained his own attorney. Sherry and I did not speak for 6 weeks, and those 6 weeks were the longest of my life since the year her father died. But she called. On a Sunday evening, our old time, and she cried and I cried, and she said things that I will keep private because they belong to her and to me and not to any wider accounting of events. I will say only that what she told me about the preceding year, about what she had been told, and what she had believed, and what she had been afraid to question, helped me understand how a person I raised with everything I had arrived at a conference room table on the wrong side of the argument. Understanding doesn't erase, but it makes room for what comes next. Owen came for lunch the following Saturday. He brought his AP history essay to show me, and I read it carefully and told him what was strong and what needed work. The way I always do. He ate 2 bowls of the chicken noodle soup I'd made that morning and told me about a girl in his class he liked. And outside the kitchen window, the maple tree was bare now November, all the leaves down, the branches clean and patient against the gray sky. They had counted on me not knowing how the system worked. They had counted on me being too old or too tired or too isolated to fight back effectively. They had counted on the version of me they decided I was, a widow, rattling around in a big house, declining quietly, easy to manage. They forgot that I had spent 31 years being the person in the room who knew more than everyone expected. I had built an entire career on understanding exactly what was happening before the other people in the room knew that I understood it. By the time they remembered who I was, it was already over. I keep thinking about that maple tree in the backyard. The one my husband planted the year Sherry was born. It was bare by the time the hearing was over. November, everything stripped down to the bones. And I'd stand at the kitchen window some mornings just looking at it, trying to understand how the same roots that held through 40 years of Pittsburgh winters had produced a season like this one. What I came to is this: the tree didn't do anything wrong. The season was just hard. I'm not a person who believes that bad things happen for tidy reasons, that there's some cosmic ledger keeping score. What I believe, what 31 years on the bench taught me, slowly and without ceremony, is that the choices people make accumulate. Derek didn't wake up one morning a different man. He got there in small steps, each one easier than the last because the previous one had already been taken. A phone call here, a fabricated concern there, a doctor he'd never met willing to sign a letter about a woman he'd never examined. Each step felt manageable, I imagine, because he'd already crossed the line before it. And Sherry, I've thought about her the most. She is not a cruel person. I know that the way I know my own handwriting. But she was a frightened one, and frightened people are capable of things that would astonish their better selves. She was frightened of losing her marriage, frightened of their financial situation, frightened of the future. And Derek had been talking to her for months before any of it reached me. By the time she was sitting across that table, she had been shaped by a version of reality that I wasn't there to contest. What I know is that moral clarity, the real kind, not the kind you announce, requires something that doesn't come automatically. It requires the willingness to ask the harder question, even when the easier one is right there. Sherry could have asked Derek, at any point, is this actually true? She had enough information to wonder. She chose not to wonder. That is the part she has to carry, and the part I believe she is carrying even now. For me, the thing that made the difference wasn't my legal background, not really. Plenty of people with expertise get steamrolled by their own families because expertise doesn't protect you from self-doubt, and self-doubt is what these situations are designed to produce. What protected me was something I'd spent decades building without knowing I was building it. The habit of keeping records. The habit of verifying. The habit of sitting still long enough to know what I actually knew versus what I was being told to believe. Call it discernment. Call it the discipline of a careful mind. Whatever it is, it has to be practiced before you need it. You can't build it in a crisis. And then there's the matter of not quitting. I was 68 years old, and my own family had filed a legal petition against me and retained an attorney and produced a fraudulent medical letter. The reasonable response, the response designed into the situation, was to feel overwhelmed and go along. Instead, I opened a notebook and started a list. I'm not telling that part to make myself sound impressive. I'm telling it because I think about the people who don't have a Maureen Gable to call, who don't know a Frances Albright, who face the same situation without the professional vocabulary and the institutional relationships. They have to make the same list anyway. They have to call whoever they can call and show up regardless and refuse to accept a version of themselves they know to be false. The tools were different for them. The requirement isn't. Owen came back the following Saturday. He ate 2 bowls of soup and showed me his essay and talked about the girl in his AP history class. Outside the window, the maple tree was bare and patient, waiting for spring the way it always has. Some things, it turns out, hold.